melee gameplay in Warframe has been pretty dull for a long time. I mean, you slap melee influence and a bit of electricity on the weapon and then call it a day. However, yesterday's update brought us a special new mod. And let me tell you, this thing turns melee completely on its head. So, in this Warframe guide, we're gonna go over how Truth's Flame works, where to get it, but most importantly, how this single mod massively changes the way that we build our melees. As always, big shoutouts to all our generous channel members, and now let's go! Now, first things first, where do you even get the new mod from? As of right now, the only way that I know to get it would be from Zorba, the new vendor that was introduced with the update yesterday, whom you can find in a relay next to the room of the Arbiters of Hexus. In order to purchase the mod from his inventory, you need the new resource Atramentum, which you can get from the new game mode Folly's Hunt. At this point in time, I'm not 100% sure if the mod can also drop from the mission directly, so if I'm missing anything here, just let me know in the comments down below. But now that you know how to get Truth's Flame for yourself, and let me tell you, I have re-recorded the phrase Truth's Flame 70,000 times for this video. Let's talk about how this thing actually works, because there's quite a lot more to unpack here than initially meets the eye. First of all, Truth's Flame is an excellence mod for your melee, and it is a Tennokai mod, meaning by installing it on your weapon, you enable the use of Tennokai. Just for completion's sake, a very quick recap, in case you forgot what Tennokai actually is. When you have a Tennokai enabling mod on your melee weapon, then for every melee strike, you have a 15% chance to trigger a Tennokai opportunity. This is visualized in the middle of your crosshairs with this melee symbol, and if you press the heavy attack button while this symbol is on screen, you will perform a Tennokai attack. These are buffed up heavy attacks that not only are executed much faster than usual, but they also don't consume any of your combo counter, unlike normal heavy attacks. So yeah, at base, that is what Truth's Flame does, it gives you a Tennokai opportunity, but that's not all. On top, it will also give 120% more damage to your Tennokai attack, which is very nice, but the main feature about this mod is that if your Tennokai attack takes out at least one enemy, then this mod gives you a guaranteed instant follow-up Tennokai opportunity. This follow-up opportunity has a longer time frame to trigger it, a total of 4 seconds, and what this means in general is that as long as you kill at least one enemy per heavy strike, you can continuously spam Tennokai attacks all day long without ever having to stop. This is ridiculously overpowered. However, Truth's Flame has sort of a bit of a high-risk, high-reward mechanic to it, in the sense that if you don't manage to actually kill an enemy with the Tennokai attack, then you're gonna lose all your combo counter and you're gonna inflict self-damage with a guaranteed heat proc that deals 100 damage over time. And for completion's sake, if the Tennokai opportunity arises, but you just don't use the Tennokai attack at all, that is fine, you're not going to be punished for that, then it just goes away and everything stays normal. That is the main gimmick of Truth's Flame, and I think it's actually way more impressive than initially meets the eye. However, there are a couple more smaller features to go over, the first one of which would be the Truth effect. Similarly to Arbiters of Hexus Syndicate weapons, also your melee that you put Truth's Flame on will gain the Truth buff. This works exactly the same way as on the Syndicate weapon, where whenever you gain enough affinity, you trigger this gas fart AoE which deals damage to enemies around you, and it also restores a bit of health and parkour velocity and yada yada. It is a nice thing to have, I would say, but that's really not the selling point of this mod. Just wanted to mention it for completion's sake. And if you could leave a quick like for the video, that would help me big time, so thank you so much for your support. Before we go on to the next chapter though, there are a couple more details with this that I found out while testing, and I think you should know about them. Remember how we just said that you have to take an enemy out with the Tennokai attack in order to get this opportunity? Well, that kill actually doesn't have to happen with the physical blade itself. If you instead strike an enemy via melee influence and that takes him out, or you have any type of melee that shoots out projectiles or something with the heavy attack and those projectiles kill the enemy, all of that still counts. The only thing that you need to make sure is that the kill happens within, I think, less than a second after you execute the Tennokai attack. So yeah, that means you want to make sure to instantly take the enemy out, inflicting status effects and then waiting for that to tick down, that is not an option here. However, you might say, what is so good about this new mod? I mean, if we wanted to have a constant 12x combo multiplier on a heavy attack build, we can just use Melee Crescendo, right? Well, actually not. See, the main difference between Tennokai attacks and Melee Crescendo is that Melee Crescendo sets your initial combo. And yes, if you stack it high enough, you can get to an initial combo of 12x. Problem though is that after doing a heavy attack, that combo multiplier still goes down to 0, and then it needs a second to actually tick up to 12 again. If you do it this way, then you have to wait with your follow-up attack until it is all the way back to 12. The difference to Tennokai attacks though is now that with Tennokai, it doesn't even consume the combo multiplier in the first place. It just stays at 12x, and no matter how fast you chain these attacks together, they will always be at 12x. Every single one of them. Oh yeah, and of course you have the arcane slot open for something else. Truth's Flame is much better than Melee Crescendo. And before we go on to the next chapter, I have a final last little tip for you, and that would be if you don't really have enough mod space for this additional Excellence mod on your weapon of choice, then I think it's perfectly plausible to also just leave it unranked. The only thing that is affected by the level of the mod is the bonus damage for your Tennokai attack, as well as the truth bonus that isn't really worth it anyway. The guaranteed follow-up attack though, that will be there regardless. If it helps, then just leave it at rank 0 and it'll only cost 6 instead of 9 capacity. But now that we covered all the ins and outs that need to be considered with Truth's Flame, let's now go over how to incorporate this mod into our builds and how it affects the build crafting of melee weapons as a whole. The first point on the list would be Galvanized Reflex. This mod is basically a 100% must-have for every heavy attack build in the entire game because it gives you so much initial combo. On top of that, we also have other sources of initial combo, something like Corrupt Charge for example, or the Ready Steel Aura mod for your Warframe. With Truth's Flame, however, all of this goes into the trash can. Going forward, if you have a melee built into heavy attacks, you just use Truth's Flame, and that means that you're always going to be at a 12 times combo multiplier. This means mods that give you initial combo, well, they're basically not needed anymore. And now that we're already talking about heavy attack builds, there's another mod that is very commonly used in those, and that would be Sacrificial Steel. This one is usually an absolute no-brainer because it gives you 440 whopping % crit chance on heavy attacks. However, also here with Truth's Flame, we're gonna do it a little bit different. Given the fact that we can now maintain a constant 12x multiplier on heavy attack builds, that means we can replace Sacrificial Steel with Blood Rush instead. This will also give us 440% crit chance. But now that we don't have a quote-unquote steel mod on the weapon anymore, that means on top of Blood Rush, we can now use Galvanized Steel. This gives us another 240% crit chance on top, plus a whole bunch of crit damage too. In fact, Galvanized Steel gives us more crit damage than actual crit damage mods. It's crazy. And now that we're talking about crit damage mods, guess what? On our heavy attack builds, we don't need Amalgam Organ Shatter anymore. In the past, we would always use the Amalgam version over the normal, because the slightly lower crit damage was well worth the trade-off for the increased heavy attack wind-up speed. Now though, given that we're always doing Tennokai attacks, wind-up speed doesn't matter anymore at all, and that means we can go back to normal Organ Shatter, getting a little bit more crit damage. Up next, a mod that usually doesn't happen on heavy attack builds would have been Weeping Wounds. Pretty obvious, right? Needs combo multiplier to really work, and that is the one thing you don't have on heavy attack builds. But now, this is also perfectly viable. I'm not saying you have to use it, but on status heavy weapons, you can now incorporate it into a heavy attack build. As you can see, quite a lot changed. However, before we end the video for today, I also want to go over a couple of melee weapon options that I personally found to be a lot of fun or a great synergy with this new mod. Now, given the fact that this additional Tennokai attack only happens when you manage to actually take out an enemy with the Tennokai attack, that means whichever weapon you're using, you gotta be confident that this heavy attack also kills. If it's, let's say, a weapon that inflicts a very strong status effect, and that status effect then nukes the enemies away after a second or so, that will unfortunately not do. Now, what does that mean in specific? It means that you're primarily looking at weapons that are very heavy hitters. I'm talking heavy attack focused melees, or maybe those that have significant slam damage. One obvious example that comes to mind here would of course be the Harmony, the literal best heavy attack melee in the game. With the Harmony, it's basically impossible that a heavy attack doesn't outright one-hit your target. This right here would be the Harmony build that incorporates the new mod. However, the Harmony is of course not the only weapon that works here. Another type of weapon that works very well here would of course be those that focus on heavy slam. I don't want to mention anything in specific, but just as an example, in the background right now, you see my build on the Arca Titron, and also here, with Truth's Flame, you will be able to do a 12 times combo multiplier heavy slam every single time. It is insane. Another weapon that I wanted to mention would be the Siam. Especially if you have good status priming going on, then as you may know, the energy wave that the Siam shoots out with a heavy attack is multiplicative on condition overload, which will lead to absolutely ridiculous damage numbers with this sword. And as we said before, with a Tennokai attack, you don't need to take the enemy out with the blade physically itself. It would be enough if this energy wave from the blade kills an enemy, and then you're also gonna get the follow-up opportunity. Same thing, by the way, goes for gunblades. This right here is an example for the Redeemer Prime, and also here you can not only trigger the follow-up Tennokai with the bullets of the weapon, but you can get the initial Tennokai opportunity too by just shooting at the enemy. And just by the way, now that we're already talking about gunblades or melee weapons that can shoot, one super secret tip that I want to give here as a final weapon would be the Chorophel. This one is a heavy scythe that, on heavy attack, shoots out a projectile. However, it always had one big issue, and that is that the projectile itself, on hit, can never give you a Tennokai opportunity. However, with Truth's Flame now, it doesn't matter if this bullet can give you a Tennokai opportunity or not, because the follow-up Tennokai opportunity that comes from the mod only cares about if your initial Tennokai strike killed an enemy, and then you can chain it again and again and again. What this means is, you start meleeing enemies until you get the first Tennokai opportunity, take out an enemy with it, and from that point on, you can continuously shoot and shoot and shoot. The Tennokai streak will never end. That is something that the Chorophel was physically incapable of before. Unfortunately though, I didn't have it fully built, so also my showcase is against the weaker enemies, but I think you get the point, right? Chorophel is going to be a complete game changer with this new mod. And if you haven't already, then check out my full guide on the brand new Warframe Folly right here. Another massive shoutout to Niels V, Demon Notzel, Demon Emperor, Emperor Prime, Nost Linux Gaming, Turtle Pier, Underkani02, Skylar Bowser, Mihawki, Socrates the Almighty Rat, Leo Morazaki, Shadow Lockhart, Heron Takas, Patrisator, Boomia1, Mr. Games, Play Zave, Amindai, Zengen, Quax, Henrik5984, Blue Eagle 98, Hearthwield, Everin 8802, Gabriel Tevez, Yako Ivan Gonzalez, and all other generous channel members for your continuous support. We see each other, hopefully in the next one, and until then, as always, good loot.